When Hannah brought Samuel to the temple at Shiloh, he was probably around 3 years old enough to walk, old enough to talk, old enough to know his mother's face and the sound of her voice, but not nearly old enough to understand what was happening to him. Think about that for a moment. Hannah walked him through the doors of the temple, presented him to old Eli the priest, explained her vow to God and then left. She went home, and Samuel stayed. The Bible does not tell us what Samuel thought or felt that first night. It does not tell us if he cried for his mother or if he reached for a hand that was not there. The scripture moves past that moment very quickly. But we are human beings and we can feel the weight of it. Little boy. Strange place. An old man he barely knew. The sound of his mother's footsteps growing fainter. And so, Samuel started living in God's house, a big beautiful tent called the temple, in the town of Shiloh. His mom had left him in the care of an old priest named Eli. As Samuel grew in the temple, he was assigned a very important job. Every single day Samuel would get up early in the morning to open the big heavy doors of the temple, keep the special golden lamp burning so it never went out. He swept and tidied and helped Eli with everything the old man needed. Eli could barely see anymore. His eyes were very dim and cloudy, so he needed Samuel nearby, to fetch things to guide him to be his helper. Samuel did all of this cheerfully and faithfully. He was not grumpy about it. He did not complain. He did not refuse. He did not spend his days sitting in a corner grieving. He served. Every day he showed up and did his job because he loved God and he wanted to serve him well. Samuel had been living in God's house since he was about 3 years old, the same age as many children starting nursery. Imagine leaving home at 3 to go and serve God. That is exactly what Samuel did. Now let's talk about Eli. Eli was a very old and overweight man, a man whose eyes had grown so dim that he could barely see. He had spent his whole life in the service of God. He knew the rituals. He knew the prayers. He knew the sacrifices and the ceremonies and the proper way of doing everything in the temple. But Eli had a weakness, and that weakness was his sons. He had 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, who were priests like their father. But they were rude and disobedient men who had no respect for God at all. They were bad from the inside out. They would steal the best portions of meat from the offerings that people brought to God. In those days the offering was holy. It was how ordinary people came before God. And Hophni and Phinehas would send their servant with a fork, before the fat was even burned for God, to take whatever they wanted first. If anyone objected, they would threaten them. They took what belonged to God and kept it for themselves. And it got worse. They took other people's wives, who served at the entrance to the temple, right there, in God's house, in plain sight. Eli heard about all of it. People talked. Word got around. And Eli confronted his sons. Eventually, he said, "Why do you do such things? I hear about your wicked deeds from everyone. If a man sins against another man, God can intervene. But if a man sins against God himself, who will speak for him?" It was a reasonable speech. But it was just a speech. He said the right words and then did nothing. He did not remove them from the priesthood. He did not discipline them. He did not stop them. He was a father who loved his sons more than he feared God, and that choice would cost him everything. And young Samuel watched all of this. Every day, he saw their dishonesties. He saw the stealing. He saw the disrespect. He saw an old man who knew the truth but would not act on it. And he kept serving God faithfully anyway. So Samuel grew up seeing a father figure fail in the most important area of leadership, holding the people he loved accountable. Samuel saw what happens when a leader goes soft on sin because it belongs to someone they love. Years later, Samuel would never make that mistake. He would confront kings without flinching. The lessons we learn by watching others fail are sometimes the most powerful ones of all. One day, an unnamed prophet came to visit Eli. He told Eli God had sent him to warn him. Here is what he said. "God chose your forefather Aaron to be priest. He gave your family the honor of serving at the altar and burning incense and wearing the priestly garments. But you have done something terrible. You have honored your sons more than you have honored God. You have grown fat on the best of the offerings while treating God's worship with disrespect. The unnamed prophet then said, God will honor those who honor him, but those who disrespect him will be disgraced. The man went on to say that both of Eli's sons would die on the same day. That God would raise up a faithful priest who would do everything God's heart desired. That Eli's family line would be cut off from the priesthood. This was a complete and total reversal of everything Eli had built his life on. His family had been the priestly family for generations. His sons were supposed to carry that forward. And now a stranger was standing in front of him saying, "It is over, because you chose your sons over God." The Bible does not record Eli's response to this message. There is silence, and that silence is one of the loudest things in the whole story. Eli could have still acted. He still could have begged God for forgiveness, removed his sons, still could have made it right. But the Bible moves on without telling us he did anything at all. Sometimes the most tragic response to a warning is simply doing or saying nothing. One very quiet, very dark night. Everything was dark except for one thing, the golden lamp of God. It was still burning. Its soft warm flame flickered gently in the darkness, throwing dancing shadows on the temple walls. Old Eli was lying down in his usual place, fast asleep. His breathing was slow and heavy. His eyes, already too dim to see clearly in the daytime, were completely closed in sleep, and young Samuel was lying down too, all curled up, eyes closed. The temple was quiet. The night was deep. Everything was still. The flame flickered, the shadows danced, and then Samuel heard his name. Samuel! He jumped up and ran to Eli. "Here I am, you called me." Eli looked at him and said, "I did not call you. Go back and lie down." Samuel went back. The lamp was still burning. The night was still dark. He lay down then again. "Samuel!" He got up again, ran to Eli again. "Here I am, you called me." Eli said, "I did not call you, my son. Go back and lie down." Samuel went back again. Lay down again then a third time. "Samuel!" He got up a third time. Went to Eli a third time. And this time, finally, Eli understood. He realized that it was God that was calling Samuel. And Eli, despite all his failures as a father and as a priest, did one genuinely good and important thing in this moment. He did not pretend it was not happening. He did not dismiss it. He did not send Samuel back to bed and keep the experience for himself. He told Samuel exactly what to do. He said, "Go and lie down, and if he calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" Samuel went back. Lay down. And God actually came and called again, "Samuel, Samuel." And Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant is listening." God then spoke to Samuel that night and told him something very serious. Something about what was going to happen to Eli's family because of the choices Eli had made. It was not an easy message. It was not a happy message. It was the kind of message that made Samuel lie there very still for the rest of the night, wide awake, thinking. Here is what God told Samuel. "Very soon I am going to do something terrible that anyone that hears of it will be shocked. I will do everything I have said that I will do to Eli and his sons. Because Eli has refused to stop his children from doing evil. Just as I had already told him before, I will punish his entire family for the sins of his sons, and no sacrifice or offering will be able to remove the consequences of Eli and his sons' terrible sins." When morning came, Samuel got up. He opened the big doors of the temple just like he always did. But inside, he was carrying something heavy, a message from God that he did not want to have to share. Old Eli called to him, "Samuel, my son. What did God say to you? Do not hide it from me. Tell me everything." Samuel was a little afraid. It is hard to tell someone something that might hurt them. It is hard to be honest when honesty feels unkind. But Eli made him to promise, which left Samuel no other option but to tell Eli the message as God have said it. He told Eli everything, every single word, without hiding anything at all. And Eli listened. And when Samuel finished, the old man was quiet for a moment. Then he said something very simple and very dignified. "He is the Lord. Let him do what he thinks is best." After that one special night, something changed in Samuel forever. God stayed with him. And God made sure that every time Samuel said something would happen, it happened. Every message he carried from God landed exactly the way God wanted. Not one word fell to the ground and was wasted. From one end of the whole country to the other, people heard about Samuel, and they all agreed that Samuel is a true prophet of God. When he speaks, God is speaking. The boy who had been lying on his mat in the dark, not knowing whose voice he was hearing, grew up to become one of the most trusted voices in the history of his whole nation. And it all started with a simple sentence. "Speak, your servant is listening." Samuel kept on listening. To God, he kept on obeying God. He kept on delivering God's messages even when they were hard. And God kept on speaking, because he had found someone who would actually listen.
Some time later, Israel went to fight against their great enemies, the Philistines. It was a terrible battle. The Philistines were strong and fierce fighters. Israel was badly beaten. 4,000 soldiers died on the battlefield in one day. The leaders of Israel sat down together and asked, "Why has God let this happen to us today?" And then they came up with an idea. They said, "Let us bring the Ark of the Covenant to the battlefield. That will save us from our enemies." Now, the Ark of the Covenant was the most special and sacred object in all of Israel. It was a beautiful golden box that represented the very presence of God. It lived in the most holy part of the temple and was treated with the greatest care and reverence. But Israel was making a big mistake. They were not treating the Ark as something holy. They were treating it like a lucky charm, like a magic object that would automatically give them victory whether they were living right or not. You cannot use God like a tool. You cannot carry his presence into a situation while living in disobedience and expect everything to go well. God is not a good luck charm. He is God. The ark arrived, and so did Hophni and Phinehas. The Israelites sent men to bring the ark from the temple at Shiloh to the battlefield. And who carried it? Hophni and Phinehas, the two sons of Eli, the two men who had stolen from God's offerings, the two men who had shown no respect for God whatsoever. They were now carrying the most sacred object in Israel onto a battlefield. When the ark arrived in the camp, all of Israel gave such a loud shout that the ground itself shook. The Philistines heard it from across the battlefield and were terrified. They said to each other, "God has come into their camp. We are in trouble. These are the gods who did all those miracles in Egypt." For a moment, it looked like everything might turn around, but then the Philistines made a decision. They said, "Be strong, fight like men, or we will become their slaves." And they charged, and Israel, despite the ark, despite the shout, despite the fear they had put in the enemy, was completely defeated. Why did God not protect them? Because the people carrying his ark were the very men who had dishonored him. Because Israel had not returned to God in their hearts, they had just brought a golden box to a battlefield. God cannot be tricked or used. He looks at hearts, not objects. What happened next was one of the most devastating days Israel had ever known. 30,000 Israeli soldiers were killed that day. 30,000, and in the middle of that terrible defeat, Hophni died, Phinehas died, both sons of Eli, both priests, both dead on the same day. Exactly as God had said through his messenger, exactly as God had said through young Samuel. The word of God had come true completely, and the very worst part, the Ark of God was captured by the Philistines, the most sacred object in all of Israel. The golden box that represented God's presence was now in the hands of the enemy. A man ran from the battlefield all the way back to Shiloh with the terrible news. His clothes were torn. There was dust on his head. These were the signs that something very, very bad had happened. When he arrived in the city, the whole town cried out in horror. The news spread through Shiloh like a fire through dry grass. Old Eli sat by the road, waiting and trembling. Eli was 98 years old. His eyes were so dim now that he could not see at all. But he was sitting by the side of the road near the gate of the city, waiting. His heart was trembling. Not for his sons. Not for the army. Not even for himself. He was trembling for the ark of God, even after all his failures, even after all his compromises, even after all the years of letting his sons do wrong. Eli's love for God and for the ark was completely real. That is what made him such a complicated and deeply human character. He was not a bad man. He was a good man who made one enormous ongoing mistake. The messenger found Eli sitting there and told him everything. Israel has fled from the Philistines. The army has been badly defeated. Your 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of God has been captured. When Eli heard the first parts, the defeat, the soldiers, his sons, he was still sitting. But when the man said, "The ark of God has been captured," Eli fell backward off his chair. And because he was old and heavy, the fall broke his neck, and Eli died. He had judged and led Israel for 40 years. And in the end, what broke him was not the news of his sons, but the news that God's presence had been taken away. Even at 98, even after all his failures, what broke Eli's heart was the loss of God's presence, not the loss of his sons. Deep down, underneath all his mistakes, Eli truly loved God. That does not undo his failures, but it tells us something real about who he was inside. One more very sad thing happened that same day. The wife of Phinehas, one of Eli's sons, was about to have a baby. When she heard the news that her husband was dead, that her father-in-law Eli was dead, and that the ark of God had been captured, the shock of it all brought on her labor. The baby came. The women around her said, "Do not be afraid. You have a son." But she did not respond. She did not smile. She did not even look at the baby. She was dying, and with her last breath she gave the baby a name. She called him Ichabod. Baby Ichabod. A name that means, "The glory has departed from Israel." She was not naming him after a grandparent or a hero. She was naming him after the worst thing that had happened that day, not the death of her husband, not the death of Eli, but the loss of the ark, the loss of God's presence. "The glory has left Israel," she said. "The ark of God has been taken." And she was gone. In one single terrible day, Hophni dead. Phinehas dead. Eli dead. The ark captured. A baby born into grief. A mother gone before she could even hold him. Everything God had spoken through his messengers had come true. Every word, every detail, exactly as he had said.